Last time, we reviewed Donkey Kong. This time, we review a completely unrelated title, Donkey Kong. Okay, we're moving on from the 2600 port to the Intellivision port. Both were published by Coleco. And according to internet rumors, this one was also designed to be made intentionally bad to increase sales of the ColecoVision console. Why does this nonsense keep popping up? Well, it was quite easy to track down the programmer for the 2600 port. The best I can find for the Intellivision port is speculation and assumptions. The joke being, nobody wanted to embrace the shame of creating this. It has been rumored, however, that some programmers at Intellivision wanted to make a port of the game to showcase their hardware, to prove that the Intellivision was up to the task. Obviously, it would not be for retail sale, licensing, legalities. But this rumor cleverly covers its tail by saying that the executives at Mattel Electronics shot this idea down, as it would be a waste of the developer's time. Perhaps there is some validity to this rumor, but nothing concrete came up while I casually perused some old forum posts. Needless to say, this port also has a poor reputation. I seriously doubt Coleco would tarnish their own brand by intentionally making a bad port of a game just because it was for another console. I suspect they did what many companies did back in those days and rushed their big licensed title out the door, giving whoever they tasked with programming it a tight timetable and minimal resources. So, is this port of Donkey Kong worth the criticism? Let's find out. As usual, I have some background viewing for you. I've really been enjoying Classic Game Room's humor lately, so I shall link to his old, but very good, review of this title. Check it out in the description below. Donkey Kong is a one-player or two-player alternating platformer where it's Donkey Kong. You don't need an explanation. I know what it is. You know it too. Overview. The directional disc controls Jumpman, moving him left or right and up or down on ladders. The side buttons are for jumping. You might want to write this down, as this game did not come with any controller overlays. The Intellivision really showcases its superiority with the ability to simultaneously showcase player 1 score, player 2 score, and the bonus timer, putting the 2600 port to shame. It even has a numeral display of remaining lives as opposed to having to count boxes in the corner. And then there's everything else. My youthful experience. The cartridge I'm actually playing on I had for a long time. It somehow got into our box of Atari games, but obviously didn't fit in the cartridge slot. I assume it was a garage sale pickup and I just didn't know any better, but who knows. As it stands, I never actually played the Intellivision port DK as a child, and only got to experience for the first time a few years ago when I acquired the console. As mentioned in episode 2, I had a lot of difficulty with the controllers on this console at first. And as you'll see from some of the gameplay footage, the directional disc is still not great 100% of the time, but it's playable. And the dysfunctionality is far more the exception than the norm. I won't play at a high level, at least not for very long, with these controller mishaps, but that's not too big of a deal to me for this game. As a kid, I probably would have found it kind of fun, but just too dang hard. Even in my slightly more mature old age, I find the difficulty a bit off-putting. Look. The girders, well, they attempted to make them slanted. I think the 2600 ports win here. The oil drum, clearly marked, that's a win for the Intellivision. Broken and unbroken ladders are distinguishable, so that's a draw. Jumpman is multicolored, but an interesting choice of palette. He also looks, I don't know how to phrase this kindly, off? Pauline is barely Pauline, and monochrome. The bucktooth pretzel is... That's Donkey Kong? What in the ever... Okay, well, he's more presentable when in the act of rolling the barrel, but still. I made fun of the 2600 Donkey Kong sprite last episode, but that's orders of magnitude better than this abomination. The barrels do look better than in the 2600. The fireballs look good, but they're less arcade-like than the 2600 port. We have the person umbrella in the rivet stage, something absent from the 2600 port. Intellivision can spawn more than 4 barrels at once, beating the 2600 there, and the fireballs can climb ladders, making the hammer slightly less pointless in the rivet stage than on the 2600. Overall, I'm disappointed in the look. It has some improvements over the 2600 port, but many, many aspects that look much, much worse. For a console with more advanced hardware, this is something that just should not happen. The animation frames are fine. Running has this clumsy, teetering look to it, but climbing and jumping are conveyed moderately well, and the barrels hint at showing off some respectable rolling action. Actually, the barrels have some of the best animation frames in this port. It's done with such minimal animation, but looks quite alright. Even when it's completely unnecessary, the barrels appear to be rolling even while Donkey Kong is holding them. Well, it makes no sense. I do like that look for that brief period before he heaves it toward you. And it's the only time you see them in that orientation. I'll give the look a poor rating, but it does have some high points. I do like the oil drum. It's still non-functional, as is the case for the 2600, but there's no confusion as to what it's supposed to be. Sound. I like the little ditties that play at the start and end of a level, but it feels like they get cut off a note or two early. The death jingle's also good. Jumpman's running sound is not great to me, but it's tolerable. Better than silence, but so marginally so that if you disagree with me, I won't defend my stance on the matter with anything resembling passion. The sound of the jump is acceptable, and the same when leaping a barrel. That sound effect is reused when collecting Pauline's items and removing rivets and smashing baddies with the hammer. It can be a bit excessive at times, so while I like it, I feel it's overused. Now, while I'm okay with most of the sounds of this port of this game, I do need to point out that the Intellivision can do way better than this. It just feels like that classic formula of an early 80s home port that was rushed out the door by the publisher without giving the programmer the time to perfect the formula. Gameplay. This is where this port and the 2600 port diverge the most, and where, in my opinion, the 2600 port surpasses this one by leaps and bounds. For starters, you need to start your jump about 2/3 of a second before what you would normally think would be good timing if you have ever played any platformer in the history of ever. Jumpman takes forever to get off the ground. He stays up there for a while, but hardly clears any horizontal distance in the process. Some who grew up with this game say that that's what gives it its charm, and I can understand that reasoning. I defend games from my childhood that the general consensus on is, it's bad. This is not a game from my childhood, though, and the very awkward jump physics are a detriment, in my opinion. When the core mechanic of a game is jumping, it's pretty dang important that the jump mechanics are less vexatious than grinding a butter knife into your thigh. The movement is pretty good. The 16 directions of control that the Intellivision touted don't really come into play here. You can only move in the 4 cardinal directions and no diagonals. While it is possible to hit a semi-diagonal and get no movement, if you're within a reasonable range of the direction you want to go, you'll go there. Unless you have controller issues. For the most part while recording this, my controller was working fine. A couple times I struggled with some down inputs not being read while trying to descend ladders, but this is an issue with my physical controller and not with the game. As usual, the hammers will only smash the enemy if the animation frame hits it, and you're exposed when raising it in the air. In the early and easy difficulty stages, this isn't too bad, but if you choose difficulty 4, don't even bother with the hammers. You're going to get steamrolled because the barrels move way too fast. This is where someone in the comments who's put more devotion to this game than I would ever consider will tell me it only takes time, patience, and practice. And they'd be right. Probably. I just would never have the ambition to personally confirm how right or wrong they are. If it's a challenge you want to take on, give it a try and feel free to tell me all about it. I promise to only show moderate disinterest in your impressive yet meaningless accomplishment. Other. The oil drum is just for aesthetics, like the 2600 port, and not a fire hazard. Don't worry, it's inflammable. It does not interact with barrels or spawn fireballs on the girder stage. Like the 2600 port, this version only has girders and rivets, then loops back to girders. I'm pretty sure Intellivision could have pulled off the spring stage, so why it was omitted? Sabotage, of course. The pie factory... The cement factory is omitted, but that's the case with numerous ports from the era. I assume there must be a specific reason why that stage in particular was difficult to include. Was conveyor technology not ripe for home consoles yet? I speculate, but if you know, share below. The difficulty will increase with each loop. As far as I can tell, the barrels and fireballs move faster. This would have been welcome in the 2600 port, which gets boring because the difficulty stagnates at 0, but in this port, okay, I still think it's a good addition. At the very least, it is to be expected for the game and the time period. The one-player experience. Since two-player mode is alternating gameplay, everything I've mentioned pretty much holds up regardless of how many players you select on the menu screen. Who would like this? I've had discussions with people that grew up with this game. Some have said that they really enjoyed it as kids, and that it is revisionist history that it's a bad game. Others stated the exact opposite and were greatly disappointed on day one. It seems that even the nostalgic crowd is polarized on this port of Donkey Kong. If you're the kind of person who likes a challenging platformer, and the challenge comes from that of the physics engine more than any particular level design or precise mechanics mastery, then you might like to take this on. For casual gamers and people who are fans of platformers, to have fun with this game, you're probably going to have to spend a lot of time acclimating to jumping controls unlike anything you've ever encountered before. I'm just not sure what personality type would have a blast with this. Maybe a glitch hunter would have some fun experimenting with unconventional gameplay with Donkey Kong for the Intellivision. I'm reaching for straws here because there's so many better Donkey Kong versions. If you'd like me to further spell it out for you, I don't really recommend this port. Relevance today. Because of its poor reputation, this port of this game remains, albeit to a small degree, in the limelight. Yeah, I said the exact same thing about the 2600, but in that one, I followed the statement up with, I don't see it as a bad game. For this one, I still don't want to use bad game when describing this port, but it is, in my opinion, the worst home console Donkey Kong port of the era. Of any era, for that matter. Well, I don't think Coleco intentionally designed it to be bad. The notoriety around it because of that rumor, in some weird roundabout way, keeps retro gamers talking about it. But will they play it? Well, I'm not an executive at Nintendo or anything like that, but I don't think you'll see them license out this disaster piece of one of their most iconic IPs in the next... When does the copyright expire? Overall. It's not all terrible, but so much of this game is just so much worse than the other ways to play Donkey Kong. It has some good aesthetics and some poor ones, some good sounds and some average ones, but the gameplay is the death nail. There are better ports, better knockoffs, and just better things to do with my time. The Intellivision is a very good console, and Donkey Kong is a very good game. The two just came together in a very miserable manner. Next. Well, we're going to continue with another port of Donkey Kong. It's not going to be the ColecoVision port. That would make the most sense, but EVAD doesn't own a ColecoVision. Nor do I have plans to get one anytime soon. If things change somewhere down the line, I'll be sure to give that port of DK a review as well. It's not going to be in sequence with the rest of them. That's where we're at. Thanks for watching, and as always, See you next mission.